Hello, this is the Dreadweaver. Prepare yourself for an evening of horrifying tales that will weave webs of terror in the darkest corners of your mind. If you're a fan of stories of mystery, true crime, paranormal, or anything that crawls in the shadows just beyond our sight, you've found the right place. This week, we have 10 brand new frightening tales to share with you. If you have a story to share, be sure to reach out via the details listed in the description below. If you like what you hear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to turn on notifications. All of these actions tell YouTube you want to hear more from us. And with that, let us delve into the darkness. Story 1. The Creepy FedEx Driver. This is a long story, so stick with me. I, 23 and female, am a bartender. I have some crazy stories where I've been genuinely scared for my life, but this has got to be the worst. I was working a double at the restaurant. Around 11 a.m., a delivery man came in with a package that I had to sign for. I signed for the package and told him to have a good day with a smile. I continued my shift as usual. This was a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember specifically, but later on, we got busy. The restaurant and parking lot were full. I see a lot of different people daily. Plus, seeing someone, for the second time ever, out of their uniform, they may be hard to recognize. The FedEx driver from that morning came in and sat at the bar. I obviously didn't remember him from the 25-second interaction we had that morning. I started talking to him as I do all my customers. I got him a drink, appetizer, another drink, entree, etc. Our conversation started. Him. How long have you worked here? Me. A few years. I've worked my way up. Him. How do you like it here? Just a regular conversation with the bar guest. It slowly became not so regular. He asked me if I had a boyfriend. I said yes. He would change the subject and then go back, complimenting me, saying how beautiful I was every few minutes. Can I have your number? No, I don't think my boyfriend would appreciate that. Okay, what's your last name? We could just be Facebook friends. All annoying, but normal interactions I've had with men in this industry. He started to become really pushy over time, pressing for my phone number or social media. I continued to politely decline and laughed it off. He then told me, I actually came this morning to drop off a package with FedEx. You signed for it. I came back just for you. I smiled and continued with my stupid customer service. Oh yeah, I remember you. I smiled and laughed it off. I even stepped in the back to vent to my manager at that point about how he was being extra pushy and making me uncomfortable. Flash forward about an hour. He paid his tab and left. I was just glad he was gone at that point. We'll say, as a guess, it was about 7 p.m. when he left. We were still busy, and we closed at 10. We finished dinner service, customers slowly started to leave, and the restaurant was finally empty. I had been cleaning for a while and was finally finishing up. It was about 10:30 at that point. I was cleaning the bar when I looked up. The whole front of the restaurant that I was facing consists of large windows that face the parking lot, and I saw one car in the parking lot. I noticed that the delivery driver from earlier was standing outside of the car, walking around it, and seemed to be cleaning the back seat out. Doors open, and he was leaning in and out with a bag. As soon as I realized it was him, who had left almost 4 hours ago, my heart sank. Why was he still here? Why was he cleaning the back seat out? I freaked. My manager and I were the only people left in the restaurant at that point. It was almost 11. I ran to her and told her everything. About how he came back just for me, and about how he had seemingly left 4 hours ago. I made her come from the back of the restaurant to behind the bar up front so she could see him in the parking lot. I don't know, waiting for me? She said she was going to call the police. At that point, my boyfriend and I had an apartment literally 5 minutes away from the restaurant. I told her not to worry about it. I would just call my boyfriend to come get me. I did just that, but my boyfriend could immediately tell something was wrong. When I'm scared or anxious, I ramble, so I gave him a quick debriefing of what was going on. He said he would be there soon, and I hung up. My manager made me sit in the office until he got there, so I didn't see this go down. All I remember is my boyfriend coming into the restaurant to get me, walking me to the car through the back door, and getting me home. My boyfriend, who is very confrontational and protective, later tells me that he pulled into the parking lot to see the FedEx driver sitting in the driver's seat of his car. My boyfriend walked up to his car and knocked on the window for him to roll it down. He did, and my boyfriend told him something along the lines of, "You need to get out of here." This is where the scariest thing happens. The dude responded to him in a different language, mumbling and acting like he didn't speak English. My boyfriend said something like, "I know you speak English. You've been talking to my girlfriend all night, and you need to get out of here." The dude continued to ramble in a different language until my boyfriend raised his voice and basically said, "You have 15 seconds before I pull you out of this car, and you never leave this parking lot." The guy finally put the car in drive and sped off. I was on edge for weeks after this interaction, and even considered switching jobs. Why was he still in the parking lot that long after closing, and hours after cashing out his tab? And why was he cleaning his back seat? To the creepy bar guest delivery driver, let's never meet again. Story 2. I didn't believe in ghosts until this happened. So back in 2015, I had a wake to go to. I was to be gone most of the day, so I had to take my dog out. Everyone on my block is super friendly. I wave to everyone and ask how their day is going. This newlywed couple moved in across the street. Not directly across, but across in 3 houses south of mine. The husband was 26 or 27, and the dude never waved. So I was walking my dog, and he was cutting the grass. I said screw it and waved hello, but it was like I was a ghost. He always seemed bitter. After the wake, I came home and my neighbor told me, "Holy shit, I have never seen so many emergency vehicles in those white vans at the house of the newlyweds." It was about 9 p.m., and those white Sprinter vans were still there. So I went to walk my dog in that direction because I'm nosy and curious about the identical Sprinter vans. I had never seen them before. Also, the lawnmower was still in the middle of the lawn. Usually, that couple parked their cars in the driveway because his garage was dedicated to those motocross motorcycles, of which he had 3 to 4 of them. Again, I had never seen those 2 identical Sprinter vans with only windows on the doors and back doors. Nothing else was out of the ordinary, and both of their cars were parked in front of the garage. About 2 to 3 weeks later, I saw 2 big trucks, and they were loading the motorcycles on there. I could see an older woman crying and shouting back at the wife, and I believed the wife's mother was there because she was shouting back. It just looked like a miserable scene, so I kept walking. Well, a few days after this, a different neighbor asked me, "Did you hear what happened?" I said, "No, I just heard about all the emergency vehicles." Well, it turned out the dude just stopped mowing the grass, went inside, and took his own life with a shotgun. The 2 Sprinter vans were cleanup crews. As we were talking, our other neighbor joined the conversation. He lives directly next door to the house where this occurred. Apparently, the man and his wife fought like cats and dogs. The neighbor said he could always hear them screaming. The guy was an airline mechanic, so he made good money. That's when I realized that the people who came for his motorcycles were his family, taking all of his personal belongings out of the house. The wife still lived there for about 7 or 8 months before selling the house. It took about 2 to 3 months to sell, and then we had new neighbors. I didn't think anything of it, and I was talking to the guy who lives next door to the house. He's an older guy, a straight shooter. He asked me if I believe in ghosts. I said, no, why? Well, the new neighbor asked him if something bad had happened there, and he told them, yes, a suicide. The new neighbor explained to the neighbor I am friends with that the water faucets would get turned on by themselves. There was non-stop banging of kitchen cabinets, and he would come home from work and hang his keys right at the door, and they would suddenly be missing. His wife was scared to be there, and apparently the realtor doesn't have to disclose murders or suicides unless the client asked. They lasted 9 months or so, and it was up for sale again. I don't want to drag the story on further, but the suicide happened 9 years ago. In those 9 years, that house has had 7 people living there, soon to be 8, as the house has a sold sign on it now. I saw the neighbor who lives directly next door to the house again, and I asked him, out of those 7 people who lived there, how many asked if something had happened at that house? He told me 3 out of the 7 asked him if something strange happened, and the other 4 kept to themselves. The house is probably worth $300,000 to $350,000, and I looked to see what it sold for. It sold for $250,000, $85,000 below market value, according to Zillow. That's what got me to believe in ghosts and hauntings. I've never bought a house before, as the house I live in was left to me. My question is, for those who have bought homes, can you see how many people have lived in the house in a short period of time? Also, wouldn't someone ask why the house is for sale for so cheap? And if they ask that question, does the realtor have to disclose what occurred even though it's not a direct question? It's really creepy because I can literally walk to the house from where I'm laying in less than 30 seconds. Story 3. On the Other Side of the Treehouse Door by AUziauzborn. When I was around 9 years old, my parents built me and my twin brother a treehouse. We lived in a very rural town in Washington State on 5 acres of land. The house and lawns took up about 2 acres of land, and the other 3 acres were woods. The treehouse sat in the middle of these woods and was hidden away from the trails inside the woods. It was a basic treehouse, nothing too fancy, but to my brother and I, it was the coolest thing in the world. We always wanted to sleep in the treehouse, but because it was in the thick woods quite a ways from the house, my parents said no. When we were 11 years old, they finally said yes after we kept begging them. My brother and I gathered up some comic books, our Nintendo DS's, flashlights, and sleeping bags, and headed out to the treehouse after dinner. Washington summer evenings are pretty comfortable, so we weren't too worried about getting cold and were more focused on having fun in the treehouse. We set up our sleeping bags in there and then began playing Pokemon on our DS's and having a good time. As it started getting darker, we switched on our flashlights and read our comic books. The treehouse door had 2 latches to keep the door shut when it got windy. 1 latch on the outside and 1 on the inside. As we got into our sleeping bags, I secured the inside latch so the door wouldn't blow open in the middle of the night. I don't remember what time it was, but I woke up to the sound of crunching on the ground below us. I sat up and listened to my surroundings, making sure I wasn't hearing things. I kept hearing the crunching below the treehouse. I woke my brother up and whispered that I heard crunching. He reached for his flashlight, but I stopped him. We sat in the pitch dark, listening. It seemed that the noise had stopped. He whispered back that it was probably coyotes and that we were fine. Not 30 seconds later, we heard the ladder to the treehouse creak with the weight of someone climbing up. Then they tried to push the door open, but luckily the latch was set and the door stayed closed. A huge thud came from the other side of the door, along with the sounds of cracking wood. We stayed quiet, too scared to make a sound. The next sound we heard was a thump on the ground that sounded like someone jumping off the last bit of the ladder and footsteps walking away. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, we got the courage to bolt back to the house. We left everything but the DS's. Even though we were scared out of our minds, we both wanted to make sure our DS's were safe, especially since I had finally caught Polkia and my brother caught Dialga. We made it back to the house in 2 minutes, running the fastest we had ever run before. The walk to the treehouse takes about 5 minutes from the back door, so the run back in 2 minutes was impressive for us. We grabbed the key under the pot and opened the back door, locking it behind us. We both went into our room, finally feeling safe. We didn't want to tell our parents what had happened because we didn't want Mom to say, "I told you so," and not allow us back out there. The next week, as we were in the post office with our mom, our neighbor who lived down the road from us walked in. As my mom and the neighbor got to talking, he told her that last week he found a very thin, greasy, disheveled man in his shed. My neighbor's dog had apparently seen the man go into the shed and was barking at the shed. When my neighbor went to go check it out, he found the man in there, holding a rusty old knife. Luckily, my neighbor had brought out his hunting rifle to check it out, and the man dropped the knife. The cops were called, and the man was taken away. I believe that the disheveled man was who was on the other side of the treehouse door, looking for a place to sleep that night. After that incident, we didn't play at the treehouse as much, and only went into those woods when it was light out, and we always took a knife with us from that point on. Story 4, Out of This World Encounter by AITAH 42. This incident happened to my wife and I about 9 years ago, maybe 10. This happened near the Buffalo airport, and the lights we saw were 100% within the airport's airspace, which is a no-fly zone, making this even weirder. This happened at the start of mine and my wife's relationship. We were going for a walk, and we saw a strange light in the sky, hovering over the train tracks nearby. This was before drones were big, so a personal drone was pretty cool. It had red, green, and yellow lights on the bottom. We kept walking and thought literally nothing of it. We have walked the train tracks near us many times. This light looked like it followed the train track, then stopped, and it slowly went to the ground, and the lights went off. About 2 seconds later, the lights were back in the sky where they started, and they were following the tracks again, and then again lowering to the ground, then lights off. This sequence happened maybe 4 to 6 times. At that point, I was talking to my wife, and I said, "This is very, very weird. Drones in the public hands can't follow the same path like this without fail, especially that many times in a row. This has to be something advanced." I jokingly told her I wanted to go on the train track to where the light was lowering and get a picture of an alien. She gave in, and we walked to the tracks, maybe half a mile away. We started walking in that direction and made a left when we got to the street, coming from my apartment buildings. We started walking to the left and headed to a viaduct and went under it. In the distance, near more of the apartment buildings, we saw 2 very tall people with long necks holding hands. We both saw this. As we walked toward these 2 tall-ass people, they were suddenly just 2 deer, and they were running at us. They got to us when we were just about under that viaduct. As they reached us, one of them broke right. One went left up the hill onto the train tracks. We were both freaked out. I wanted to run after them, and my wife, girlfriend at the time, was not having it. She explained to all of our friends that it took everything she had to get me to not follow these things and go home instead. I walked her back home and then told her I was going alien hunting and calling my buddy down the street so we could get a picture of an alien. A little later, said friend and I regrouped on the train tracks where my wife and I last saw the deer. We walked to the light without seeing anything. The area we were in had train tracks heading away from my apartment buildings. On our left was woods, and after about a quarter mile on our right was a huge warehouse with tons of rows of giant hangar-like buildings. It looked like it would store planes. We kept walking straight. To our right, someone walks out of a door in the warehouse, and I could have sworn they were staring right at us. It was pitch black, so I don't know how they saw us, but they did not move from staring us down. We brushed it off and kept walking. Long story short, we didn't find anything. Nothing like a landing site or anything cool at all. I was kind of bummed out. But this really freaked us out, and we still get goosebumps when talking about it. Story 5. A creepy half-built mansion in the middle of the woods. I grew up in the deep country on a mountain in the Pacific Northwest and had a half-broke pony we got for $50 when I was a kid. John was big for a pony and mean as a snake. Quick to bite, loved to buck, but he also loved me, and only me. I loved that shithead horse right back. One day, when I was about 10 to 12 years old, I decided to go on a long ride with John alone without even telling my mom that I was leaving. Don't do that. I was riding on old logging trails for about an hour when we found this lovely clearing with a half-built mansion, which was weird on its own because everyone on that mountain lived in a dilapidated trailer. I left him in front so he could wander around and eat grass while I explored. It was so weird. It looked like it had been abandoned years ago. I climbed the unfinished stairs to the 3rd floor looking for a view. When I got up to the top, I noticed a lot of obvious bullet holes and rusty brown all over the only door. It felt like it was pulling me in physically, like gravity. Suddenly, I heard my pony scream, and he came stumbling up the stairs with the whites of his eyes showing, a sign of fear. Horses hate stairs and will avoid them, but he was coming for me. I climbed on him, and he ran, stumbling as fast as he could down those stairs, and did not stop running full tilt away until we were home. I could barely hold on, and felt weirdly dizzy, like I had been spinning around in circles. My mom was so worried about me when I arrived that she barely yelled at me and put me right to bed. Apparently, she had to walk John for over an hour to get him to cool down because he was overheated from running so fast. He normally wouldn't let anyone but me near him and hated all adults, but he did everything she asked that afternoon. Here's another weird thing. I left my house early in the morning before my mom woke up. It felt like I was only gone for a couple of hours, but when I got home, it was almost dark. Over 5 hours were unaccounted for. John refused to ever go on that logging trail again. Not that I wanted to go there either. I'm not sure what it was. John was brave. He wasn't scared of barking dogs. He even stomped 2 German shepherds to death once and chased a cougar off our property. I never saw him that scared, before or after. Story 6. My Mom's Alien Encounter by Fit Combination 4626. My mom doesn't like talking about this story much because she knows most people will call her crazy, but I'd like to share her story since this will be anonymous. My mom was 17 years old and it was the 80s. She was out with her friend and coming home from a small party. driving home because she had an 11 p.m. curfew. They were driving on a quiet countryside road near a big field when she and her friend suddenly saw these huge, giant lights in the sky that shined on them super bright. My mom said she and her old friend have no memory of what happened after that. They just remember waking back up in the driveway at home, inside the car, with no memory of driving back home or anything that happened after the lights. It was also now 4 a.m. My mom isn't sure how her parents didn't notice she was home so much later than she was supposed to be, but then again, her parents kind of just did their own thing when she was that age. My mom still has no idea what happened and has zero memory of it. But ever since, she's been having these dreams once every few years, where she's laying on some sort of metal table in a room with different colored lights. She can't move or speak, and there are a couple of these tall, skinny figures with big black eyes that she says look like a stereotypical alien surrounding her, performing some type of surgery or something on her body. It's weird because ever since the first dream, where she's always in this situation, it's like the dreams keep continuing over the years. She wakes up and then has the dream a few years later, where they continue where the last dream left off. I don't know much about aliens, and neither does my mom. We've never really looked into it much, but we do believe in it and all weird things of the world. What do you guys think? Story 7. The Mysterious Changing Road. I went on a drive with my dad today on the back roads past my hometown. We just wanted to explore the more rural areas surrounding us, you know? So we went for this joyride, minding our own business and having fun until we encountered this eerie, extremely narrow, one-way gravel road in the middle of nowhere, with no signs of life anywhere in sight, aside from the memorial of a man who crashed and died. We drove through this creepy-ass area, midday mind you, for about an hour going straight. Along this ride, we found a bunch of rusted-out, large, crumpled hunks of metal. We couldn't even make out what these shapes even used to be. We also found random-ass structures that we also couldn't figure out. It was like an unfinished area with no signs of life anywhere. Anyway, we turned around finally, driving this same narrow road where we hadn't seen another car in an hour, and we made it back to the memorial site in 10 goddamn minutes, driving slower than before. The kicker is that we found a bunch of furniture that wasn't there before, and there was no sign of anyone else. How the fuck did we drive an hour's distance in 10 minutes while going slower? The whole ride back was completely silent. My grown-ass dad was freaked out too. Someone help. Story 8. The creepiest coincidence I've personally experienced. I was a young guy in college, driving back to campus from somewhere when I ran out of gas. It was getting dark, maybe 6 or 7 p.m. When I realized the gas ran out, I turned off the main street. Then, with my car's remaining momentum, I glided until I stopped in front of some random house. I sat in the car trying to think if there was anyone else I knew with a car who stayed on campus for the winter break. No dice. So then I resigned myself to the fact that I needed to walk to wherever the nearest gas station was, fill up the little gas can from my trunk, and then walk back. I went and grabbed the canister, and before I walked, I leaned on the front of my car and looked up directions. Just then, a woman pulled into the driveway. She was also college age, wearing some sort of server's outfit, like she worked in fast food. I was parked right out in front of her house when she noticed me. She came up, a little hesitant, and asked if I needed help. I said, "Honestly, yeah, I ran out of gas, and it says here we're kind of a far walk from the Chevron." She looked at me like she had seen a ghost. At first I chalked it up to it getting late, me being a guy, and her trying to gauge if I was messing with her. but it really struck me how afraid she suddenly looked. I tried to assure her I had the gas can and I didn't need to go with her or anything, and I could pay for it. She took the can but refused any money. I waited there for a while. She came back, handed me the canister, and then stood there for a second. I could tell she was deciding whether or not to say something. Then she just straight out asked, "Do you want to hear something weird?" Of course I said yes. She said, "Today at work I got this prank call. But it was a weird prank call in that all it was just the guy on the other line kept asking me over and over, 'Have you ever ran out of gas?' After she told me, we both just kind of chuckled, not really knowing what to say except thanks and take care. It genuinely gives me chills every time I think about it." Story 9. My brother's fear scared me too. I, 24 and female, live with my aunt, her husband, and their 2 kids, a 15-year-old female and 2-year-old male. My bio sisters and I pretty much helped raise her kids, so we see them as bonus siblings. The 15-year-old was sleeping over at a friend's house, my uncle was at work, and my aunt was decorating a float for a Christmas parade that weekend. I was home alone with the 2-year-old from 4:30 to 10 p.m. I'm used to sitting for him, and besides the standard toddler antics, he's not a bad kid. About an hour before my aunt came home, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner while her son was in the living room playing with his toys and watching cartoons on YouTube. Out of nowhere, I heard him let out this terrified scream, and he came running into the kitchen crying. As soon as he saw me, he waddled over and clung onto my pant leg and wouldn't let go. I picked him up and he buried his face in my hoodie, still crying. When I asked him what was wrong, he kept pointing to the front door, saying, "Door!" According to my aunt and uncle, the house has a history. Before my uncle bought it in 1989, 2 brothers allegedly killed each other on the property. I felt uneasy from time to time, and while my brother has done odd things before, I have never seen him get this scared before. Whatever he saw, it scared me too. With the alleged deadly history of this house, I don't doubt that something still lingers here, even decades later. We do know, however, that there's a protective spirit among us, my aunt's late grandfather. Still, seeing him so petrified has me shaken to my core. Story 10. The Reappearing Ring. This happened a few years ago, and has become so infamous in mine and my husband's relationship because it legitimately freaks my husband out to the point where we can't even talk about it besides referring to it as the ring. One Saturday morning, I was finishing up getting ready for work and went to go put my everyday jewelry on, wedding ring, college class ring, and watch, when I realized my college ring was missing from its usual home on my nightstand. This was a very special and sentimental item to me, so I was a little panicked when I couldn't find it after a few minutes. I called my husband in to help me look for it, and we proceeded to turn the house upside down for it. He double-checked everywhere I looked, and we scoured both our bedroom and the rest of the house for it, to no avail. I was starting to run out of time to make it to work, so I had to leave without finding it. I returned home after my 8-hour shift, proceeded to drop my bag at the door, and headed straight to the bedroom to change clothes. The second I walked in the bedroom, I saw my ring. It was sitting right on my nightstand, in perfect plain view. I got so excited and assumed my husband had found it for me while I was gone, and had placed it there. I figured he was trying to surprise me with it, since he didn't text me to let me know he found it. So I sat on the bed and waited for him to walk in the room so I could thank him. As soon as he walked in the room, I excitedly exclaimed, "You found it!" He stared at me with a confused look and said, "What are you talking about?" I pointed to the ring, still on my nightstand, and said, "My ring! You found it!" Where was it? He got an even more confused look on his face and said, I didn't find it. Where did you find it? I started rolling my eyes at this point, thinking he was messing with me, and said something like, Oh, come on, where was it? We went back and forth for a while over who found the ring, until I realized my husband actually wasn't kidding at all. He was genuinely confused and thought I was messing with him. His face became more and more serious, and we both stared at each other, understanding that neither of us had actually found it. My husband, a man of science, began going over every possibility of how I could have found it when I got home, placed it on my nightstand, and then forgot I did all of that. I explained to him I had left the house without either of us finding it, literally hadn't been home all day, and had just returned less than 15 minutes ago, where I hadn't done anything except drop my bag and walk into the bedroom, where it was sitting there waiting for me. To this day, we don't have a single possible explanation for it. He refuses to believe anything other than the idea that I somehow found it and then immediately forgot I did that, which is absolutely impossible. How could I completely forget both finding it and placing it on my nightstand? There's no way. But he refuses to believe in ghosts or anything that doesn't have a rational explanation, and I don't have a single other logical possibility for its return. It's been years, and we still can't talk about it without getting completely spooked about the whole thing. And while I don't have a rational explanation, I do have a wishful thinking one. My grandpa, my hero, had passed away a month before. Was he looking out for me? I'll never know. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Dreadweaver. I'll be back next week with more terrifying true tales. If you would like to submit a story of your own, head to our subreddit at r/thedreadweaver or send us an email at thedreadweaver@outlook.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and click the bell icon to turn on notifications if you want to hear more. Until our paths cross again in the shadows, stay vigilant and beware the whispers of the night. This is the Dreadweaver, signing off.